Sunshine, laughter, a carefree walk on a Sunday afternoon. This was just another ordinary day for 13-year-old Daniel Morcombe on Australia's beautiful Sunshine Coast. But a trip to buy Christmas presents for his family turned into a nightmare. Daniel vanished without a trace. The bus he was waiting for never saw him. Where did he go? And what dark secret would his disappearance unlock? Let's uncover the hidden truth behind the mystery disappearance of Daniel, a story of loss, hope, and a fight for justice. Before we dive into today's video, make sure to hit the bell icon so you don't miss any updates. We upload daily. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and join our amazing community. Now, let's get started. Daniel Morcombe, born on 19th December 1989, was 13 years old, living a happy life with his parents and brothers in the picturesque town of Palmwoods, nestled in the heart of Queensland's Sunshine Coast. Palmwoods, known for its close-knit community and tranquil surroundings, was the perfect place for the Morcombe family to call home. Daniel was a typical teenager, full of dreams and endless curiosity. He was adored by his family, a beacon of joy and innocence. His parents, Bruce and Denise, always described him as a kind-hearted boy with a bright future ahead. Daniel Morcombe was kidnapped from an unofficial bus stop under the Keel Mountain Road overpass. This spot is in the Woombi district of the Sunshine Coast, about 2 kilometers north of the Big Pineapple. This happened on Sunday, December 7th, 2003. People saw Daniel around 2:10 p.m. under the overpass. He was planning to catch the 1:35 p.m. bus to the Sunshine Plaza shopping center. He needed a haircut and wanted to buy Christmas presents. However, the bus he was waiting for had broken down. A replacement bus came, but it didn't stop because it was late, and the stop wasn't an official one. The bus driver called the depot to send another bus for Daniel. Witnesses and the bus driver later said they saw 2 men near Daniel. When the next bus arrived just 3 minutes later, Daniel and the 2 men were no longer there. Daniel Morcombe's disappearance is one of the most deeply investigated crimes in Queensland's history. By December 12, 2008, there were big rewards offered to help find him. The government offered $250,000, and people privately donated another $750,000. The private reward ended at midnight on May 31, 2009. On that same day, the 7 Network, a TV channel, reported that a man named Douglas Jackway, who was a known pedophile, might be important to the police investigation. Jackway had been let out of prison 1 month before Daniel went missing. The Queensland government faced criticism for letting Jackway out of prison. Peter Wellington, an independent MP from Queensland, said that the Supreme Court had shown clear evidence that Jackway could commit crimes again. This news made some groups worry. These civil liberties groups called for new laws to stop the media from naming people who are linked to criminal cases but not yet proven guilty. They felt it was wrong to publicly name people who might not be involved in the crime. Earlier in the month, a large-size clay model of the man believed to be involved in Daniel Morcombe's kidnapping was placed at the spot where he disappeared. This helped a lot because within a few days, the police received more than 300 tips from people. Daniel's parents asked for a coronial inquiry in July 2009 into his disappearance. They were particularly interested in hearing from several criminals who had told the police they knew who killed Daniel. The coronial inquest took place between October 2010 and April 2011. During the inquest, many witnesses were called to speak. These included the bus driver who had not stopped for Daniel at the overpass, a woman who had seen a man hanging around near Daniel, and several other people who were of interest to the investigation. Daniel's parents hoped that this information would help find out what really happened to their son. The police arrested Brett Peter Cowan on August 13, 2011, after a big undercover operation called Mr. Big. They charged him with Daniel Morcombe's murder child, stealing, taking away someone's freedom, indecent treatment of a child under 16, interfering with a body, and other crimes. The police managed to catch Cowan after he led undercover detectives to Daniel's remains. Cowan was born on September 18, 1969, in Bunbury, Western Australia. His parents, Marlene and Peter Cowan, raised him and his 3 brothers in Brisbane, Queensland. His father, a major in the Australian Army and a Vietnam veteran, often struggled with PTSD, making him frequently absent from the family. Growing up, Cowan attended Marcellin College, now called Mott Maria College, where he had a reputation for being a bully, according to one teacher. However, some classmates remembered him differently, describing him as an ordinary guy with few interests. Cowan dropped out of school in year 10 and took up various odd jobs, but never stuck with one for long. He also grappled with his bisexuality and engaged in petty crime, which led to his first conviction at 17. His involvement with drugs like LSD, cocaine, and methamphetamines further complicated his life. Cowan had a tough childhood dealing with family issues, personal problems, and getting into trouble with the law. Cowan had to perform community service duties at a public park in Brisbane because of his theft and drug offenses. On December 5, 1987, while carrying out his community service, Cowan, who was 18 years old at the time, abducted a 7-year-old child from the park and sexually assaulted him in a toilet cubicle. In 1989, Cowan was punished to 2 years in prison, but he was released after half of his punishment. In September 1993, a 6-year-old boy was lured by Cowan into an abandoned car yard while he was living at a Darwin caravan park with his 18-year-old girlfriend, Tracy Hannaveld. Cowan raped the boy, leaving him with a punctured lung and several cuts. Cowan initially denied any involvement, even going as far as saying to the police, "I hope you catch the bastard," in an attempt to appear innocent. A background check by the officers also revealed Cowan's previous conviction for molestation in 1987. The police confronted him with the evidence, and he quickly confessed to the rape. In 1994, following his trial in the Northern Territory Supreme Court, Cowan received a 7-year prison for multiple charges, including grievous harm, deprivation of liberty, and gross indecency. Ultimately, he only served 3.5 years of his punishment. Psychological evaluations conducted during his incarceration painted a troubling picture of Cowan's character, labeling him as a pathological liar with a parasitic lifestyle, often relying on his parents for support. During Cowan's time in prison, his girlfriend Tracy Hannaveld talked to him about the crimes he was accused of. Even though Cowan didn't say anything, Hannaveld figured out he was guilty, and it made her very upset, so she ended their relationship. In March 2014, Hannaveld talked about their troubled relationship, publicly mentioning that Cowan had been unfaithful. After getting out of prison in 1997, Cowan said he wanted to change and went through a sexual offenders treatment program. He stayed with his aunt and uncle, who were pastors on the Sunshine Coast, and got involved in church. He moved to Beerwah with his church friend Tracy Lee Moncrief, and they got married in 1999, having 2 kids. He seemed to be doing better and avoided trouble until 2003, but then he stopped going to church and his marriage fell apart. It was later found out that he was using gay dating websites, which raised doubts about his rehabilitation. In 2006, Cowan had been questioned about Daniel's disappearance. He told the police that he had been traveling along Keel Mountain Road that day to buy marijuana from a drug dealer. Cowan confessed that he had seen Daniel and approached him, offering him a ride to the shopping center. He said he had parked his car in a nearby church parking lot, the same church he attended. This confession was a big breakthrough in the case, finally giving Daniel's family some answers about what happened to their son. The police work and undercover operation were crucial in bringing Cowan to justice. Around this time, the police took a white Mitsubishi Pajero from a place on Russell Island. They thought this car might have been used in Daniel Morcombe's abduction. During the coronial inquest, a witness said they saw a car like this parked about 100 meters north of where Daniel was last seen. This was an important lead for the investigation. On August 21, 2011, during a search in Glasshouse Mountains, 2 shoes and 3 human bones were discovered. These shoes looked like the ones Daniel Morcombe wore when he went missing. Besides, they also found underpants and a belt. However, there was something missing. Daniel had a special pocket watch with Dan on it, but they didn't find it. As the search continued, they found more bones like a rib, hip, leg, arm, and vertebrae. To make sure these bones belonged to Daniel, they used DNA from his toothbrush to match them. Sadly, it was confirmed that all these bones were indeed Daniel's. This discovery led to Daniel's funeral, which took place on December 7, 2012 at Siena Catholic College. Over 2,000 people came to pay their respects and say goodbye to Daniel. It was a sad day for everyone who knew him. On February 7, 2014, Cowan was told he had to go to trial. They accused him of murder, doing inappropriate things with a child who was under 16 years old and not handling a dead body properly. The trial took place in the Supreme Court of Queensland and started on February 10, 2014. The judge overseeing the trial was Justice Rosalind Atkinson. The prosecutors finished presenting their case on March 7th. During the trial, 116 people came to talk about what they knew, and they showed more than 200 pieces of evidence. Cowan said he didn't do it and chose not to speak in court. It was a big trial with lots of attention. People wanted justice for Daniel, and they wanted to know what really happened to him. On March 13, 2014, Cowan was found guilty of all the things he was accused of. He had been in trouble before for doing bad things to children. The next day, March 14, 2014, he was given a life sentence in prison. But after 20 years, he might have a chance to get out if he behaves well. He also got more years for indecently doing things to Daniel and for messing with his body. The judge, Rosalind Atkinson, said she didn't think Cowan should ever be let out of prison. Cowan wasn't satisfied with this decision, so he asked the Queensland Court of Appeal to change it. He said the confession he gave to the police shouldn't have been used in court. But on May 21, 2015, they said no to his request. Even the former Queensland Attorney General wanted Cowan's punishment to be worse, but they said no to that too. It was a tough time for everyone involved, especially for Daniel's family who wanted justice for their son. After Daniel Morcombe went missing, his family started a campaign called the Daniel Morcombe Foundation. They used this foundation to keep Daniel's case in people's minds and to try to figure out what happened to him. The foundation's main goal is to teach kids how to stay safe and to tell everyone in Australia about the dangers of bad people who want to hurt children. The media in Australia helps a lot with this. Every year, especially on the day Daniel disappeared, they called Day for Daniel. This is to remind everyone how important it is to keep kids safe. Another event they do is called Ride for Daniel. People ride bikes for 50 kilometers around the Sunshine Coast to remember Daniel and to support the cause. They've been doing this since 2005. It's a way for Daniel's family to turn their pain into something good. They want to make sure no other family has to go through what they did. In 2015, Bruce Morcombe, Daniel's father, reached out to the family of another missing child, William Tyrrell. He wanted to give them some advice based on his own experience. Bruce warned them about psychics who might come forward with strange and unhelpful information. He said these distractions could be distressing for the family. Bruce explained that even though they got many leads, like people saying there was a shed or a water tank involved, none of them really helped. But they still had to pay attention to them, just in case there was something important hidden in them. He also mentioned that collecting data from CCTV cameras and ATM cameras was more useful. This evidence could help the police if they had a suspect in mind. Bruce's main advice to the family was to try to stay positive. He reassured them that the police were doing their best to solve the case, and remaining hopeful was the best thing they could do. Daniel Morcombe's tragic murder has been the subject of various media projects. In 2005, it was featured in an episode of Crime Investigation Australia titled Tears for Daniel. A film titled Where is Daniel was also planned with Peter Cousins directing and Dean Cundy handling cinematography. Additionally, the case gained attention in the true crime podcast world when it was covered by Case File True Crime Podcast on July 2, 2017. Bruce Morcombe, Daniel's father, shared his perspective on the family's ordeal in an episode of ABC's You Can't Ask That. This episode focused on families of missing persons. In the realm of fiction, a film called The Stranger was released in October 2022. This movie fictionalizes the undercover police operation that led to the capture of Daniel's murderer. However, in July 2022, Daniel's parents expressed their displeasure with the filmmakers for continuing to use his name to promote the film, demanding that they stop. The verdict: guilty. A flicker of relief washes over Daniel's family, a bittersweet victory. But the details of what happened to Daniel are never fully revealed. The monster behind the crime takes his secrets to his grave, leaving a chilling void. 8 years, a stolen childhood, a family forever haunted by what-ifs. The Sunshine Coast remains forever stained by this dark chapter, but Daniel's legacy lives on, his name a rallying cry for child safety. Frozen alive. In 1967, a group of friends embarked on an ambitious adventure to conquer North America's highest peak, Mount McKinley, now known as Denali. But for them, the mountain had a different plan. Their expedition turned into a nightmare when a monster storm hit, trapping them on the icy slopes. Imagine the freezing winds howling, the snow swirling around them, and the climbers struggling to stay alive. Some fought bravely, but sadly, 7 climbers vanished, swallowed by the storm. Get ready for a journey through one of the most tragic disasters in mountaineering history, where the strength of the human spirit clashed with the harsh forces of nature. This is the story of the Mount McKinley disaster, showing us how close success and tragedy can be in the wilderness. Mount McKinley is the tallest mountain in North America. It reaches a height of 20,310 feet above sea level. But what's really astonishing is that if you measure from its base to its peak, it's about 18,000 feet high, making it the tallest mountain in the world in this way. This massive mountain is found in the Alaska Range, deep within the state of Alaska. It's the main attraction in Denali National Park and Preserve, a vast area of protected wilderness. Joe Wilcox, a 24-year-old student, organized an expedition to climb Mount McKinley. 8 other students, Jerry Clark, age 31, Steve Taylor, age 22, Dennis Luchterhand, age 24, Mark McLaughlin, age 23, Anshel Schiff, age 30, Hank Janes, age 25, John Russell, age 23, and Walt Taylor, age 24, joined the expedition. The park rangers thought it would be safer if Joe Wilcox's team joined forces with another group led by Howard Snyder from Colorado. Snyder's team, initially made up of 4 men, Snyder, 22, Jerry Lewis, 31, Steve Lewis, and Paul Schlichter, 22, was more experienced in climbing, so the Rangers suggested that both teams team up since they were planning to climb the mountain around the same time. On June 22nd, the 12 climbers started their journey up Mount McKinley using the Karstens Ridge route, which is cheaper but less popular. By July 13th, despite feeling sick from the high altitude, they set up a camp at 15,000 feet. Some reports say park rangers warned them about a big storm coming around July 16th to 17, but Joe Wilcox, the leader, said they didn't get that message. Regardless, they decided to keep going since the weather seemed fine. The next day, 8 of them moved up to their final camp at 18,000 feet, planning to reach the summit. On July 15th, 4 members set out from the high camp for the summit at noon: Wilcox, Snyder, Lewis, and Schlichter. The rest stayed back to rest. The team of 4 reached the summit around 6:30 p.m., with Schlichter describing great weather and amazing views. After spending about an hour and a half at the summit, they returned to the high camp around 9:50 p.m. The next day, strong winds forced all 12 team members to stay at the high camp. On July 17th, after the winds calmed down, the team got ready to move. 7 members planned to climb to the summit, while the 4 who had already reached the summit on the 15th climbed back down to the camp. Anshel Schiff also decided to go down due to altitude sickness. Wilcox's group began descending around 1 p.m., but Clark's group heading for the summit started late, after 2 p.m., which was unexpected. Steve Taylor stayed at the high camp due to altitude sickness. By 8 p.m., a storm hit the mountain. Clark sent a radio message to the Rangers, saying they were on the upper slopes, lost in dense fog. They decided to wait it out overnight. The next day, at 11:30 a.m., Clark radioed again, saying 5 climbers, including himself, had reached the summit, but Russell hadn't. They planned to descend soon, but were stuck due to bad weather. This was the last contact from the climbers who ascended on the 17th. After radio contact ended, a severe storm hit the mountain, with winds reaching up to 300 miles per hour. Wilcox believed it was the worst weather ever faced by mountaineers. With no word from the climbers near the summit, concern grew. On July 20th, Wilcox, Snyder, and Schlichter tried to go back up but had to turn back due to bad weather. They called for help when they saw no signs of the missing climbers. The storm raged on for 2 more days, causing problems for the 5 men at 15,000 feet. They shared a small tent, unable to cook food. Some became weak, while others suffered numbness in their toes and fingers. On July 23rd, the weather condition improves, and they descended to a camp at 12,100 feet. They received help and food from climbers from the Mountaineering Club of Alaska. The next day, some of the MCA members went with the survivors to ensure they made it safely, while others went to search for the missing 7 climbers still on the mountain. On July 25th, the 5 survivors of the Wilcox expedition reached base camp. Wilcox went to the Wonder Lake Ranger Station to get help. A helicopter was sent to rescue the remaining survivors. On July 28th, the Mountaineering Club of Alaska members searching for the missing climbers found 1 body at the high camp. It seemed the person froze to death while clutching a tent pole. They also found 2 more bodies at Archdeacon's Tower, frozen in a bracing position against the wind. Identification was difficult due to the poor condition of the remains. Some speculated about the identities. None of the other 4 remains were ever located. The 3 bodies found on the mountain were left behind. Recovery wasn't possible due to lack of equipment for high-altitude operations at the time. After the incident, Bradford Washburn, a renowned mountaineering expert, labeled it as the worst disaster in U.S. mountaineering. He blamed the terrible weather and the climbers' bad decisions. The Park Service thought about stop climbing on Denali, but they didn't do it in the end. The 1967 Mount McKinley disaster is a stark reminder that mountains demand respect. It's a story of ambition, the power of nature, and the high price some pay for adventure. While the tragedy claimed the lives of 7 climbers, their story lives on. It serves as a valuable lesson for all who dare to venture into the wild, a lesson of preparation, respect for the elements, and the importance of teamwork. In the heart of the unforgiving Pamir Mountains, a dream expedition turned into a chilling nightmare. In 1974, a team of women mountaineers set out to conquer the mighty Lenin Peak, a summit that promised breathtaking views and ultimate triumph. But what awaited them wasn't glory, but a terrifying fight for survival. A sudden and savage blizzard struck, transforming the mountain into a deadly trap. Isolated, battered by the elements, and running out of time, the climbers faced an unimaginable fight. Would they find a way to escape the clutches of the unforgiving mountain, or would Lennon Peak claim them all? Join us as we delve into the harrowing story of the Lennon Peak disaster of 1974, a tale of courage, desperation, and the fight against the raw power of nature. Standing tall on the border between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, Lennon Peak, also known as Ibn Sina Peak, pierces the sky at a staggering 7,134 meters, 23,406 feet. It's the undisputed king of the Trans-Alai Range, a massive mountain chain snaking through Central Asia. While not the highest peak in the region, it's still the second highest in both Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. The mighty Pamir Mountains, home to some of the tallest mountains on Earth, cast a long shadow over Lennon Peak, with only Ismoil Somoni Peak exceeding its height in Tajikistan. In July 1974, a group of 8 determined women set out to conquer Lennon Peak. Led by Elvira Shataeva, a celebrated Soviet climber, they attempted to make the first all-female ascent of Lennon Peak in an effort to prove that women were equal to men and could climb without the help of the opposite gender. Their dream, however, turned into a nightmare, leaving a chilling mark on mountaineering history. Their journey wasn't without challenges. The equipment they received wasn't top-notch, even by Soviet standards of the time. Some reports suggest they were issued basic cotton tents, ill-suited for the harsh mountain environment. Additionally, warnings arrived from the base camp meteorologist. A storm was brewing. Despite these red flags, the women, fueled by a desire to prove their strength and equality, pressed on towards the summit. On August 5th, they reached the peak. It was a tough climb, but they did it. They must have been so happy, but their celebration wouldn't last long. Just like the warning said, a terrible storm hit. Strong winds blew hard against the mountain, tearing their tents to shreds. Up so high, without a good place to hide, they had no choice but to head back down. Sadly, not much is known exactly about what happened next. There's a saying, "Dead men tell no tales," and that applies here. We do know the storm wrecked their tents at the top. Those thin tents made of cotton weren't strong enough for the wind. Without a way to dig a safe place to wait out the storm, they had to try to get down the mountain. With no choice but to descend, they started their way down. A crazy storm exploded around them, blowing really hard. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the wind felt like it could bite right through their clothes. Then, another big problem. A giant crack in the ice, hidden by the snowstorm, became a scary danger. Some of them managed to climb around it, but the terrible weather was making them weak. One by one, the women became victims of the mountain's fury. The harsh conditions were winning. Exposure turned into hypothermia, making their bodies weak with each passing hour. The wind screamed around them, a scary reminder of how dangerous things were. Some stories say something incredibly sad happened. They didn't want to leave their friends who were getting weaker, so they all stayed together. This choice, made out of love and loyalty, might have been what took their lives. Another group of climbers, lucky enough to find a safe spot during the storm, heard about their fight for survival. But by the time they reached where the women had camped, it was already too late. Sadly, they found the 8 women climbers one by one, their bodies scattered across the mountainside. The tragedy of Lennon Peak sent shockwaves through the mountaineering community. The mountaineers have been criticized for assembling the group based on gender rather than experience. And it's been suggested that if a team picked for their skills, not their gender, might have been able to avoid this whole disaster. Up on the mountains, it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. The mountain treats everyone the same. The Lennon Peak disaster of 1974 remains a chilling reminder of the unforgiving power of mountains. These brave women, driven by ambition and camaraderie, lost their lives in a fight against the elements. Their story teaches us valuable lessons about respect for nature, the importance of proper equipment and planning, and the need to prioritize safety over summit glory. Mountains will always be there to challenge us, but let's make sure we meet that challenge with knowledge, preparation, and a healthy dose of respect. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of disaster. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories of tragedy and survival. Stay safe out there, and remember, adventure is great, but coming home safe is even better.